Welcome to Cut to the Chase, where we talk about compelling legal, regulatory, and public interest information and news. Your host is Gregg Goldfarb, an attorney, entrepreneur, investor, and activist.
All right, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. We're going to cut to the chase because every day it seems like there's another mass shooting. And no matter what us well-intentioned people try to do, nothing seems to happen either in court or in Congress. And so the other day I was reading an article, an opinion piece in Law 360, and I saw that Tom Diamore, an attorney out in the Oregon, California, Washington area, has come up with somewhat of a unique angle on how to attack this problem. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Greg, thanks for having me.
All right, Tom is board certified truck accident law board certified civil trial advocate, and now author also. I guess, you write that article. It's a great article, lots of information in that article, some pretty disturbing statistics, including the latest, I guess the 10th deadliest mass shooting in the United States history. What was that all about? What happened there?
Well, that out on your coast in Maine, that shooting that occurred, a former military person with military training and apparently was continuing to have military training, just decided to open fire for no good reason, killing 10 people and injuring others. All too often we hear that same kind of story nowadays.
Yeah. And, I think with what's going on in the world, sadly, I'm not a gun guy. I don't like guns. I feel nervous around guns. I talked to some of my friends who were of the same mindset, and some of them are now buying guns. They're afraid, and it was just kind of startling to me to see some of my friends who I really thought were really anti-gun actually doing that. But we now know that Congress really can't do much. The NRA is too powerful. And this has happened before. And so let's go into your take on what can be done.
Well, my thesis is that trial lawyers can make a difference in this gun violence situation. It was trial lawyers that got seatbelts in cars, got airbags in cars. It was trial lawyers that represented individuals from the bombing in New York, and it was trial lawyers recently that brought opioids to the fore through lawsuits. Congress and state legislatures on all of those issues really didn't act until trial lawyers started bringing lawsuits. And I think it's a way to motivate corporations, public facilities, that, hey, you're on notice now. Every single day we open the paper or read in social media about another mass shooting, which is defined by most as more than 4 people were injured or killed. Over 624 last year, 620 the year before that, and probably going to be more mass shootings in 2023 by the time the year is over. So the objective is to tell businesses, and including our law firms, that you need to take steps to make it safe for your customers and your employees. And if you don't, there is premises liability law that can enforce the wrongdoing against those folks. Yes, the perpetrators should be punished and often are criminally, but the victims of these mass shootings are just kind of left hanging out there. So the bottom line is businesses, corporations, schools, you need to make the effort. The technology is there to make your establishment safer. And if you don't, then trial lawyers need to step up and start bringing these claims.
All right. So yeah, a lot of people, look at lawyers like, oh, we're just doing whatever it is to, advance our client's interests. But lawyers oftentimes, like you point out, have provided, public health and public benefits through their litigation when Congress either refuses to act or, they act and then there's no enforcement. I think with the opiates, Congress has acted and set up like the red flags, like, hey, if you're selling, if you got 50 people in your community and you're selling, 2 billion opioid pills, you gotta do something about that. But with the guns,
but it didn't start until after trial lawyers started bringing these lawsuits. Now the legislation is coming around.
has come around. And so, with the Second Amendment, and I have to quote it. I'm sorry here. It's a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So I'm not sure what militias, legitimate militias that are in existence, but apparently being an originalist and a textualist means that you basically unfettered right to, you just go in and buy a gun and don't bother with anything. You can't get universal background checks, even though the population wants it, because the courts, when Congress or the state governments do act, they block it. So we're stuck with, using the legal system, like you say, to try to do something. So what can the civil justice system do? I understand you want all these places, listen, concerts, sporting events, schools, supermarkets, we've got to secure our customers and make sure they're not coming in and getting attacked. But what about the gun manufacturers? What do you think? What is your take on their spot in this whole equation?
Well, unfortunately, we have bad federal legislation, PLACA, which I'll tell you what the acronym stands for: Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. And what that is a fancy way of saying gun manufacturers, distributors, and others have immunity from being sued, no matter what they do. And most of the lawyers that have dedicated their lives to bringing these claims against manufacturers, the only way they can bring those claims is to try and find exceptions to this PLACA law. And there was the case out in Connecticut. Josh Koskov and the Koskov firm brought a claim against Remington, and eventually got through all of the PLACA restrictions and was successful in that case to the point where it actually settled for $70 million. And the insurers for Remington paid that claim in full, and Remington went out of business. So a lot of good things happened from that case. And it just takes lawyers willing to fight against the odds in a lot of these cases and keep doing what that firm did.
I mean, as upset and passionate as I am about, the gun control, gun regulations, and where we're at with that and all the amount of shootings, I just have to laugh at. So the statute that you referred to is called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. So that sounds really good. And that is basically blocking you from suing a gun manufacturer if they do what? Like, what is the gun manufacturer doing wrong in the first place, or negligent, or somehow or another violating the laws?
Well, they're putting out AK-47s, AR-15s with magazines that can kill many people in a matter of seconds. That's one of the areas that the gun manufacturers have been attacked. And that's part of the reason for my theory is it's very hard to go after the manufacturers and the distributors of these guns. And so you've got, as a trial attorney, you've got to look at other avenues. For instance, if in a motel, if in the last year, 3 people have been killed from gunfire or from or women being raped at the motel. They have a duty to tell people about it or put in proper security measures. So I think a lot starts with these manufacturers, but the law's just not good. We have to do other things. I analogize it to auto cases that we're very familiar with. We need to pass legislation that, like in autos, everybody has to have a driver's license to drive a car. Everybody should have a gun license to have a gun. There should be gun insurance.
How about insurance?
Yeah, there should be gun insurance so that if somebody wants to carry a gun, they pay insurance. The number of deaths from guns has now exceeded the number of deaths from automobiles in our country.
Nice.
It's something that needs to be addressed in different ways than traditionally, and we can do that. We've done that before.
All right, that's where I want to go next. Now, so you're basically, in the lawyer speak, you're saying we should utilize the civil justice system to attack this problem, going after the gun manufacturers, trying to do workarounds for this immunity. Well, before we even get onto the other examples what is immunity? Like some
immunity,
people just don't.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we do the lawyer talk a little bit too much sometimes. Immunity means that you cannot bring a lawsuit against a gun manufacturer for what they did wrong for causing the injury or death to somebody. It means they are immune from liability. And if somebody does try and file a case against a gun manufacturer, a lot of times those cases are kicked out of court before they even get to a jury trial, because they are immune from liability.
Yeah. And so what I've, now that I'm sort of seeing that there might be a place for lawyers in this whole equation, I've started to research this issue a little bit more. And I was like, well, what are the gun manufacturers doing? That's, they're making guns, they're making these guns that people want to buy that, have large capacity, and you just bang, 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 and it's, it kind of, I don't know, when you talk Second Amendment, I don't really see that the Second Amendment says that, but be that as it may, the gun manufacturers are, from what I'm seeing, making, they advertise, they market, there are a lot of different manufacturers, and from what I'm seeing, that some of their advertisements are just really, they're really bad, and they should be held accountable. I mean, they're trying to convince people, it looks like, that, hey, buy our weapons, and you're like in the military, you're like, protecting the society or whatever. And it's just complete bunk, so people are like falling in line. Hey, I'm a patriot, let me go buy an AK-47. I don't know. But all right, let's move on to other examples where the civil justice system has taken over, where Congress cannot step up to the plate.
Yeah, I mean, one example is a case that we had here in Oregon. It was my first foray into a gun case, because I was like a lot of lawyers. If I see somebody being shot, it's like, okay, it must be some kind of intentional tort, which is hard to actually prosecute unless you're prosecuting against the perpetrator. But we had a case where an individual, and again, you need to look closely at the facts of each case. This was an individual who was mentally disturbed, who was able to, through the internet, an internet company, and a pawn shop, able to buy several firearms. And he then went out and murdered a young lady, shot her several times, and then started her on fire. It was a terrible, terrible case. And brought suit, but both of the defendants in the case tried to use PLACA, that immunity law, to protect both internet providers and the pawn shop. And we were able to get around PLACA through actually co-counsel that were very, very good gun lawyers and have dedicated their lives to these types of cases, were able to get around PLACA and say, no, internet providers and pawn shops that don't properly follow the law, including the PLACA law, in getting testing to see if these folks are legitimate purchasers. And it was a straw man purchase where the mother of this individual was also purchasing guns. And so that case eventually settled, but it made the point that, you know, there are some exceptions to PLACA, and it doesn't cover internet providers or pawn shops or folks like that. And that's part of the other problem. The manufacturers and others want to use that law to protect themselves, even when they're not manufacturers.
Yeah.
We got a current case now where a security guard, a rogue security guard, shot and killed a man that was sitting in his car with his wife 4 times, bang, 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 through the front windshield, killing him. And they just they had a vendetta out against this guy. But we went beyond just the shooter, who was from a security guard company who is liable, but also the company that hired the security guards was the owner of the property and also the management company of the property. And they sort of conspired to harass this guy and eventually kill him. So there's other defendants out there that plaintiffs' lawyers can seek if they look into these cases a little bit deeper.
All right. So this is a novel approach. You mentioned the cars that, now guns are killing more people than cars. And the lawyers have actually helped out make the car industry safer. So with this game plan that you wrote your article about has actually similarly been employed in the car context too.
That's right. And I certainly don't think that lawyers bringing these claims are going to end this scourge that we have of gun violence and and more guns coming into our country. But it's a start and a step in the right direction. And I think it even alerts businesses and companies that, hey, there are things you can do to make your premises safer.
Yeah. Well, it's just really disturbing to me. I know that there's another Supreme Court case coming up, Rahimi, with the domestic abuse statute, and they're attacking that because apparently now Justice Thomas and his wisdom has created a new test out of thin air that any gun control legislation has to basically have been in existence since the founding fathers. I don't really get that, but I just it worries me that we really can't attack the problem head on, and that we're having to talk about proposals like yourself. So I mean, is the theory that Remington is out of business now? So you're going to all right, maybe we put a bunch of them out of business. Maybe we hit them with civil penalties. They got to pay, and maybe they won't advertise falsely and encouraging excessive gun play, so to speak. Is that basically where we're at with this whole equation?
Yeah, and take the Remington case for example. Did the seller, whoever sold those guns, did that seller meet all of the requirements and safety and background checks to sell that? I mean, you've got to look at a lot of different issues. The school where that the shooting happened, are they taking proper measures to protect the children? And if they're not, I mean, again, there are some states and cities that do have immunity for the cities and the states, but that's not necessarily a good thing because it again allows folks to not be safe enough. And the argument that we didn't know better or that we weren't on notice, I think that's kind of gone away. there's going to be more and more and more gun violence. And we as a society need to take protections to make sure that people keep their premises safe.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we're people like you are trying to do their darndest to figure out any way to help and get compensation and this immunity. I don't know of another industry that has this kind of immunity. I mean, in the old days, and I'm talking about like before the United States was founded, it was, I think the immunity, the phrase was, you can't sue the king. So that was immunity.
Right.
Now we've basically said, all right, well, you could sue the king for a couple things, but with limitations or whatever. But it really is disgusting to me that an industry like the gun I mean, I can understand like medical, companies or whatever that are, I know with like vaccines, there's some limited liability, some immunity that the companies that, create the vaccines have. But even that is, not a complete immunity like this. It's
a blanket immunity. It just goes to show that lobbying and the NRA and those folks can get politicians to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, Tom, listen, I think that we got to step it up. You're stepping it up. The fact that you publish this is great because I think a lot of lawyers don't even know about this. And, maybe they do know people that, were victimized by gunplay, and whether there was no security or whether the person, got guns from a gun manufacturer that was up to no good or whatever, we got to suss that out. It's got to be a team effort. I think, because all other avenues seem to be foreclosed. So I appreciate what you're doing. We're going to talk more about this. I know you've given me a couple of names of other attorneys that are involved in this litigation. I'm going to try to get them on the show because I really want the attention out there. People should know about this immunity. Your states might provide other immunity also. And maybe you want to know about that, maybe that disgusts you like it disgusts me. But I thank you for coming on the show.
All right, Greg. I appreciate you doing this and getting the message out there. It's a good thing.
All right, Tom Demore of Demore Law Firm. So I'm going to put his information in my show notes in case you want to reach out to him for whatever reason. And that'll do it. Subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any questions, especially on this topic, you know where to find me. Let me know, and I'm going to try to get some more people. I want as much attention as I can possibly provide on this topic. So that'll do it today. Tom, have a good day.
All right, you too, Greg. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.